You know that moment when your whole life changes in the span of about 3 seconds? Yeah, well, mine happened while I was sprawled out on our living room floor like a busted scarecrow, staring up at my psycho sister wielding a hammer like she was Thor having a bad day. And let me tell you, there's nothing quite like the sound of your own bone cracking to really put things into perspective. So there I was, my arm twisted at some god-awful angle that definitely wasn't in any anatomy textbook, and the pain? Jesus Christ, it was like someone had plugged my nervous system into a car battery and hit the gas. My vision was doing this funky little dance between black spots and white-hot agony, and I'm pretty sure I tasted pennies, which is never a good sign unless you're literally eating loose change. But here's the kicker. Marissa, my dear, sweet, completely unhinged older sister, was standing over me like she'd just won the freaking lottery. Her chest was heaving like she'd run a marathon, but that satisfied smirk on her face? That was pure, concentrated crazy right there. The hammer was still dangling from her hand like some twisted trophy, and I swear to God, she looked proud of herself. Proud, like she'd just solved world hunger instead of potentially crippling her own flesh and blood. And where was dear old mom during this delightful family bonding moment? Claudine. Because of course, she had to have some fancy French name that made her sound way more sophisticated than she actually was just chilling in the doorway like she was watching a mildly interesting sitcom rerun. Arms crossed, that familiar look of complete indifference plastered across her face, and then she drops this absolute gem. You're overreacting. Overreacting? Overreacting? Lady, your daughter just went full WWE on me with a construction tool, and I'm overreacting? I'm lying here looking like a pretzel that got into a fight with a blender, and apparently, I'm being dramatic. But you know what? This wasn't exactly breaking news in the dysfunction Olympics that was our household. This was just Tuesday in the life of the family scapegoat. As I'm lying there, trying to figure out if my arm was supposed to bend that way. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Something clicked in my brain. Not like a bone clicking. God knows I'd heard enough of that already. But something deeper. Something that had been building up for years, like pressure in a shaken soda bottle. This was it. This was my rock bottom, come to Jesus, enough is enough moment. The pain shooting up my arm felt like liquid fire. My stomach was doing backflips that would make an Olympic gymnast jealous, and my whole world was spinning like a drunk tornado. But through all that chaos, one thought cut through the noise clearer than a church bell. I was done. Done being the punching bag. Done being told my pain didn't matter. Done being gaslit into thinking that having my bones rearranged was somehow my fault. This was the absolute last time, and I mean the very last time, that these two psychopaths would get to decide how much agony I was allowed to feel. So, what do you think happened next? Did I finally fight back, or did I do something even more dangerous? Something that would change everything forever? Welcome to bumfuck nowhere, Midwest, USA, population. Not enough to matter, but just enough for everyone to know your business before you do. Picture this. Endless cornfields, a main street that died sometime in the 90s, and exactly one Dairy Queen that passes for fine dining. Yeah, this was the magical kingdom where I got to spend my formative years, and let me tell you, it was about as exciting as watching paint dry in slow motion during a power outage. After Dad, Gerald, God rest his soul, decided to peace out by a heart attack when I was 12, our little family dynamic went from mildly screwed up to completely off the rails. And that's when Mom decided to find herself a new religion, family reputation worship. Because apparently, when your husband drops dead, the most logical response is to become obsessed with what the neighbors think instead of, oh, I don't know, maybe getting some therapy? But here's where things get really fun. Claudine turned favoritism into an Olympic sport, and guess who was her gold medalist? That's right, Princess Marissa, the walking, talking embodiment of everything I could never be. This girl could literally burn down the church, and Mom would find a way to spin it as artistic expression or youthful exuberance. Meanwhile, I could cure cancer and get a lecture about how I should have done it faster. Every single day was like watching some twisted reality show called Keeping Up with the Golden Child. Marissa gets straight B's? Oh honey, you're so naturally gifted. I get straight A's? Well, studying is easier for some people. Marissa breaks something? Accidents happen, sweetie. I breathe wrong? Why can't you be more careful like your sister? And don't even get me started on the whole helper situation. While Her Royal Highness was busy being praised for existing, I became the family's unpaid intern. Dishes, laundry, grocery shopping, cooking, you name it, I did it. And when I'd ask Marissa to help, Mom would swoop in with her favorite catchphrase, "Don't bother your sister, she's busy." Busy doing what? Perfecting the art of being useless? But the real kicker was when Marissa would straight up steal my stuff or, physically assault me, and I'd make the rookie mistake of complaining. That's when Mom would break out the greatest hits collection. Let It Go, She's Just Playing, You're Being Too Sensitive, and my personal favorite, Family Sticks Together. Yeah, because nothing says family bonding like having your stuff stolen and your face rearranged on a regular basis. Over time, I learned the most valuable lesson of my childhood: keep your damn mouth shut. Pain was apparently a solo sport in our house. Got hurt? Deal with it quietly. Feeling upset? Suck it up, buttercup. Need emotional support? Good luck with that, kiddo. I became a world-class expert at swallowing my feelings and pretending everything was peachy keen while my insides felt like they were being fed through a wood chipper. The favoritism wasn't about love. Hell no. This was about control, pure and simple. Mom had found the perfect system. Keep one kid on a pedestal and the other one scrambling for scraps of approval that would never come. So, want to guess how well that brilliant parenting strategy worked out for everyone involved? Spoiler alert, it didn't. Fast forward to me at 17, busting my ass at a part-time job that paid about as much as a kid's allowance. But hey, every penny was going toward my golden ticket out of this madhouse, college. I had this little shoebox under my bed stuffed with crumpled bills and loose change, and let me tell you, watching that pathetic pile grow was like watching grass grow, except slower and more depressing. But it was mine, damn it, and it represented something these lunatics couldn't touch: my future freedom. So picture this scene. I'm sitting at our kitchen table that's seen better decades, probably calculating for the millionth time how many more shifts at the local burger joint I'd need before I could afford textbooks, when Princess Marissa comes waltzing in like she owns the place. Which, let's be honest, she basically did in Mom's twisted little universe. "I need $1,000, she announces, not asks, announces, like she's reading the weather forecast. No, please, no, could you help me out? Just straight up demanding my hard-earned cash, like I'm her personal ATM. And what did Her Majesty need this small fortune for? A trip to Miami with her equally brain-dead friends, because apparently, spring break in our exciting cornfield paradise just wasn't cutting it for the princess. Now, any normal human being would have laughed in her face and told her to take a long walk off a short pier. But this was Marissa we're talking about, the girl who'd been handed everything on a silver platter since birth and couldn't comprehend the word no if it was tattooed on her forehead in neon letters. Absolutely not, I said, and damn, did it feel good to watch her face go from entitled confidence to genuine shock. You'd think I'd just told her Santa Claus was a fraud and the Easter Bunny was unemployed. The audacity. How dare the family doormat suddenly grow a spine? Cue Mom's grand entrance, stage left, ready to play her favorite role, Marissa's personal defense attorney. "Don't be so selfish," she starts, because of course wanting to keep my own money for my own education was the height of selfishness. "Your sister works hard too." "Yeah, hard at what? Professional Instagram scrolling? Advanced couch warming techniques?" But here's the thing that shocked everyone, including myself: I didn't back down. For the first time in my pathetic doormat existence, I looked both of them dead in the eye and said, "No. Find your own damn money." The silence that followed was so thick you could have cut it with a butter knife. You could practically see the gears grinding in Marissa's head as she processed this unprecedented act of rebellion. And that look in her eyes? Pure, concentrated rage mixed with disbelief. I'd just shattered her entire worldview where little sister always caves. So what do you think happened when the golden child finally heard a word she'd never learned to accept? The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck driven by a particularly vindictive gorilla. My arm was throbbing like it had its own heartbeat, and every tiny movement sent lightning bolts of pain shooting up to my shoulder. But you know what was even more painful? Listening to Mom and Marissa at breakfast, chatting about their day like nothing had happened, like I hadn't been sprawled out on our living room floor getting acquainted with a hammer the night before. Don't forget to pick up milk on your way home, Mom tells Marissa, buttering her toast like she's performing brain surgery. Not a single glance my way, not even a, hey, how's that potentially broken arm doing? Nope, just your typical Tuesday morning in Dysfunction Central. The second their car pulled out of our gravel driveway, I was moving. Well, okay, moving is a generous term. I was more like shuffling around like a zombie extra in a low-budget horror movie. But I had a mission, and that mission involved getting my ass to someone who actually gave a damn about whether my bones were supposed to bend that way. The bus ride to urgent care was pure torture. Every pothole felt like a personal attack, and the driver apparently learned to drive from a demolition derby instructor. By the time I stumbled through those sliding glass doors, I probably looked like I'd escaped from a war zone, which honestly wasn't that far from the truth. Enter Janine, the nurse who took one look at me and immediately switched into what I like to call concerned adult mode. You know that look? The one that says, "Kid, your life is clearly a hot mess, but I'm going to help you anyway." She took my vitals, asked about my pain level, and then dropped the bomb that changed everything. "Honey, this doesn't look like it came from a fall." Boom. Just like that, someone finally called bullshit on the family narrative. No beating around the bush, no polite pretending, just straight-up recognition that something was seriously wrong with this picture. I almost cried right there in that sterile little examination room with the motivational kitten posters. Then came Dr. Patel, this middle-aged guy with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses who looked at my x-rays like he was reading a particularly disturbing novel. He confirmed what I already knew. My arm was definitely not supposed to look like abstract art. But then he did something that absolutely blew my mind. He listened when I told him the truth. The whole truth. Years of violence disguised as sibling rivalry, Mom's Olympic-level gaslighting, the hammer incident, everything. And you know what he didn't do? He didn't tell me I was overreacting. He didn't suggest family counseling or ask what I did to provoke it. He documented it as domestic violence and handed me a support center's phone number like it was a lifeline. For the first time in my 17 years of existence, an adult outside our twisted little bubble knew exactly what was going on. And they believed me. Think that was scary? Wait until you see what I did next. Walking back into that house felt like entering enemy territory, except the enemies were related to me and had legal guardianship rights. Fun times, right? But something had shifted in me during that clinic visit. Maybe it was finally having an adult believe me, or maybe it was the pain medication making me feel invincible, but I wasn't the same doormat who'd left that morning. I was a doormat with a plan. The next few days were like playing the world's most dangerous game of chess, except the stakes were my sanity and possibly my life. I moved through that house like a ghost, keeping my mouth shut and my eyes wide open. Every interaction was calculated, every response measured. Marissa and Mom probably thought the hammer had knocked some sense into me. Little did they know it had knocked some strategy into me instead. First order of business, documentation. You know how they say the camera doesn't lie? Well, neither does a smartphone with decent resolution. I started photographing everything. My bruised arm from every angle, that damn hammer still sitting on the kitchen counter like some kind of twisted trophy, the hole in the living room wall from where Marissa had accidentally thrown a book at my head last month. Every piece of evidence that proved our happy family facade was bullshit. But here's where I got really smart. I started screenshotting text messages. Oh, the beautiful, incriminating text messages. Marissa bragging to her friends about putting me in my place. Mom's passive-aggressive guilt trips about how I was tearing the family apart by being dramatic. Pure gold, every single toxic word preserved forever in digital glory. Packing was the tricky part. You try secretly stuffing your entire life into a backpack without anyone noticing. It's like playing Tetris, except the pieces are your important documents, favorite clothes, and that ratty stuffed elephant you've had since you were 5. Don't judge me. Birth certificate, social security card, passport, the tiny amount of cash I had left after the Miami fund raid attempt, everything that proved I existed as an independent human being. Then I made the phone call that changed everything. Mrs. Carver, my sophomore English teacher who'd always seemed to actually give a damn about her students. You know those teachers who see right through your everything's fine act? Yeah, that was her. When I called and asked if she meant it when she said students could reach out if they needed help, there wasn't even a pause. Pack light and be ready, she said, like she'd been expecting this call for years. The support center was my next lifeline. They hooked me up with a prepaid phone, because apparently when you're escaping an abusive situation, your regular phone is basically a tracking device. They also gave me this little notebook and told me to write down everything. Every incident, every threat, every time Mom told me I was imagining things. So there I was, sitting in my room that last night, surrounded by years of accumulated proof that my family was toxic as hell, with an escape plan that would make a Navy SEAL proud. Ready to find out if I actually had the guts to pull it off? You know those moments in movies where the hero makes their dramatic escape with explosions going off in the background and epic music swelling? Yeah, well, my grand exit was about as anticlimactic as a wet firecracker. No explosions, no dramatic confrontations, no inspiring soundtrack. Just me, a backpack that weighed more than my entire future, and the sound of my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. It was a Tuesday afternoon, because apparently life-changing moments don't wait for more convenient scheduling. Mom was at her part-time job at the insurance office, probably boring some poor customer to death with stories about Marissa's latest achievements. And speaking of the golden child, she was off doing whatever it is that entitled princesses do on Tuesday afternoons, probably getting her nails done or practicing her victim face in department store mirrors. I'd been watching their routines for weeks like some kind of suburban spy, timing everything down to the minute. Mom left at 1:30 p.m. sharp every Tuesday for her shift. Marissa usually didn't roll her lazy ass home until after 5, and that gave me a solid 3-hour window to execute Operation Get the Hell Out. The funny thing about finally leaving an abusive situation? You'd think there'd be this moment of hesitation, some dramatic internal monologue about family loyalty or second thoughts. Nope. When Mrs. Carver's beat-up Honda Civic pulled into our driveway at exactly 2:15 p.m., I felt nothing but pure, concentrated relief. It was like seeing a rescue helicopter after being stranded on a desert island, except the desert island was my childhood home, and the rescue helicopter was my former English teacher. I slipped out of that house like smoke, my backpack slung over my good shoulder, not even bothering to look back at the place that had been my personal hell for 17 years. No tearful goodbyes to my childhood bedroom, no sentimental moments with family photos. Just me, walking away from the only life I'd ever known, and feeling lighter with every step. Mrs. Carver didn't ask a million questions during the drive, which was perfect because I probably would have started crying and never stopped. She just handed me a bottle of water and some crackers, like she understood that sometimes what you need isn't deep conversation, but basic human kindness and snacks. That first night in her guest room was surreal as hell. Clean sheets that smelled like fabric softener instead of dysfunction. A door that locked from the inside. Silence that wasn't pregnant with the threat of sudden violence. I kept waiting for someone to burst through the door screaming or for Marissa to start pounding on the walls, but it never happened. Instead, I fell asleep to the sound of actual birds chirping outside the window instead of raised voices echoing through thin walls. When I woke up the next morning, there was sunlight streaming through curtains that weren't held together with safety pins, and for the first time in forever, I wasn't immediately calculating how to avoid conflict before my feet hit the floor. This was freedom, and damn, did it taste sweet. But did they just let me go that easily? Oh, you sweet, naive reader. 2 months of sweet, blissful freedom later, guess what lands in my mailbox? An honest-to-God formal invitation to a family dinner at Aunt Linda's house. Not a text, not a casual phone call, but an actual printed invitation like we were hosting the freaking Met Gala instead of another dysfunctional family gathering in suburban purgatory. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. Suddenly, I was important enough to warrant fancy cardstock. Mrs. Carver found me staring at that invitation like it was a bomb with a timer counting down. "You don't have to go," she said, but we both knew I did. See, running away was step 1, but this was step 2 in the How to Reclaim Your Life from Psychopath's Handbook. It was time to stop hiding and start serving up some truth with a side of stone-cold receipts. So there I was, walking into Aunt Linda's house with my folder of evidence tucked under my arm like I was heading to the most important business meeting of my life. The whole extended family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even great-uncle Bob, who usually only showed up for funerals and free food. Perfect audience for what I had planned. Dinner started exactly like every other family gathering. Forced pleasantries, passive-aggressive comments disguised as jokes, and everyone pretending our family wasn't a complete disaster. Mom kept shooting me these pointed looks across the table, probably trying to guilt me into apologizing for my dramatic exit. Marissa was playing her role perfectly, the confused, hurt sister who just couldn't understand why I'd abandoned the family. But then came dessert time, and oh boy, did Princess Marissa decide to put on a show. She launched into this Academy Award-worthy performance about how heartbroken she was about my sudden departure and how she just couldn't figure out what went wrong between us. The real kicker? She actually mimed the hammer swing while telling everyone it was just normal sibling roughhousing that I'd blown completely out of proportion. That's when I stood up, and let me tell you, the silence that followed was absolutely delicious. You could have heard a pin drop in that dining room as I calmly opened my folder and started laying out the evidence like a prosecutor presenting a murder case. First came the photos, my bruised and swollen arm from every angle, the hammer sitting on our kitchen counter, the hole in the living room wall. Then the screenshots of text messages, printed out in glorious high definition. Marissa's bragging messages to friends, Mom's gaslighting masterpieces, all of it spread across Aunt Linda's carefully set table like a twisted photo album. But the piece de resistance? Dr. Patel's official statement documenting domestic violence, complete with his medical assessment and professional opinion. I read that baby out loud, word for word, watching faces around the table go from confused to shocked to absolutely horrified. Marissa's mouth was opening and closing like a fish out of water, but for once in her entitled life, she had absolutely nothing to say. Want to know what happens when the golden child's mask finally slips in front of the whole family? Holy shit, did that truth bomb create some serious fallout? It was like watching a social earthquake in real time, and let me tell you, the aftershocks were absolutely beautiful to witness. Within 24 hours of my little evidence presentation, my phone was blowing up faster than a celebrity scandal on Twitter. Turns out, when you expose your family's dirty laundry in front of everyone, people have opinions, and some of those opinions were actually in my favor for once. Aunt Linda was the first domino to fall. She called me personally to apologize for not seeing the signs and to let me know that Marissa and Mom were officially persona non grata at any future family gatherings. Uncle Dave followed suit, along with my cousins Sarah and Mike, who apparently had their own stories about Marissa's quirky behavior that suddenly didn't seem so quirky anymore. It was like watching people connect dots they didn't even know existed. But here's the thing about family drama, it's never clean. Some relatives went full Switzerland on the situation, choosing the path of least resistance by pretending nothing happened. Others, particularly Mom's sister Carol, decided I was an ungrateful brat who'd destroyed the family for attention. Because apparently, documenting abuse is just a cry for help these days. Who knew? The real plot twist came when the police showed up at Mom and Marissa's door. Turns out, when a medical professional reports domestic violence and you have documentation up the wazoo, law enforcement tends to take an interest. Not that I expected much to come of it. Hitting your sibling with a hammer apparently falls into some legal gray area when you're both minors, and it happened months ago. But still, watching them squirm under official scrutiny was better than Christmas morning. Meanwhile, Marissa's social media became pure entertainment gold. This girl went full victim mode, posting cryptic messages about family betrayal and people believing lies. She even posted some filtered selfies with captions about healing from toxic relationships. The irony was so thick it was practically suffocating. Her friends ate it up, of course, because they only knew Princess Marissa, not hammer-wielding Psycho Marissa. But you know what I did during this beautiful chaos? Absolutely nothing. I stayed off social media, ignored the flying monkeys Mom sent my way, and focused on my own life like a boss. Every fiber of my being wanted to screenshot Marissa's ridiculous posts and add my own commentary, but Mrs. Carver had given me some solid advice. Let them dig their own graves. And boy, did they ever. Every dramatic post, every attempt to control the narrative, every passive-aggressive comment just made them look more unhinged. I was learning that sometimes the best revenge is just living your life while your enemies self-destruct in public. The biggest revelation? Peace didn't mean winning some epic battle or getting revenge. Peace meant closing doors completely and walking away from people who would never change. Think that was the end of their attempts to drag me back into the madness? College became my personal paradise, and I'm not even being dramatic about it. After 17 years of walking on eggshells and dodging metaphorical landmines, campus life felt like I'd been transported to some alternate universe where people actually treated each other with basic human decency. Who would have thought that was even possible? I dove into psychology like a woman possessed, partly because I wanted to understand what the hell had been wrong with my family, and partly because I figured if I could survive that nightmare, I could probably help other people survive theirs. Every textbook chapter about family dynamics and abuse cycles felt like reading my own biography, except with fancy academic language and actual solutions instead of just suck it up, buttercup. The library became my second home, and not just because I was a broke college student who couldn't afford to heat my dorm room properly. There was something beautifully peaceful about being surrounded by knowledge and quiet people who weren't plotting ways to make my life miserable. I landed a work-study job there, shelving books and helping freshmen figure out how the Dewey Decimal System worked. It was honest work that didn't involve dodging flying objects or defending my right to exist. But the real game changer was my internship at the campus counseling center. Working with other students who'd survived their own family disasters was like finding my tribe. These weren't broken people, they were warriors who'd fought their way out of hell and were rebuilding their lives one healthy choice at a time. I learned that healing wasn't just about escaping the crazy, it was about creating something better in its place. And let me tell you about the friends I made. Actual friends, not people who tolerated me or used me as their personal emotional punching bag. There was Jessica, my roommate who introduced me to the revolutionary concept of conflict resolution through actual conversation instead of violence. Mike from my abnormal psych class, who made me laugh until my sides hurt and never once made me feel like I had to earn his friendship. Sarah from the counseling center, who taught me that vulnerability was a strength, not a weakness. These people supported me without conditions, celebrated my successes without jealousy, and created the kind of safe space I didn't even know existed. When I told them about my family situation, they didn't minimize it or suggest I should work things out. They just listened, believed me, and helped me understand that what I'd survived wasn't normal or acceptable. Eventually, I saved enough money to move into my own apartment, a tiny studio that cost more than it should have, but it was mine. I decorated it with furniture from thrift stores and yard sales, each piece chosen because I actually liked it, not because it matched some impossible standard of perfection. The walls were covered with photos of my chosen family, inspirational quotes that didn't make me want to vomit, and my college diplomas that proved I was building something real. My success wasn't about proving anything to Mom and Marissa, it was about proving something to myself. I was more than the sum of their abuse, stronger than their attempts to break me, and capable of creating a life they couldn't touch. But did they get the memo about staying out of my new life? Fast forward 3 years, and there I was, living my best life as a licensed counselor at the same center where I'd interned. I had my own office with motivational posters that didn't make me want to gag, a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Therapist" because humor is healing people, and a client load of amazing humans who were working their asses off to break their own cycles of dysfunction. Life was good. No, scratch that. Life was fucking fantastic. Then my email notification pinged, and guess whose name popped up in my inbox like a bad rash? That's right, Princess Marissa herself, reaching out after years of blissful silence. For a hot second, I thought maybe she was finally ready to apologize, take accountability, or at least acknowledge that hitting people with hammers isn't normal sibling behavior. Boy, was I wrong. The email was a masterpiece of entitlement disguised as reconciliation. She started with some bullshit about missing me and wanting to reconnect, but then, and this is where it gets really rich, she casually mentioned that she'd heard about my job at the counseling center and wondered if there were any openings. You know, for someone with her natural ability to help people and her understanding of family dynamics. I had to read that shit twice because I couldn't believe the audacity. This woman, who'd spent years terrorizing me and had shown exactly zero signs of personal growth or accountability, wanted me to help her get a job working with vulnerable people. The same person who thought conflict resolution involved construction tools was asking to be put in charge of other people's mental health. The irony was so thick it could have been served at Thanksgiving dinner. But here's the beautiful thing about healing and growing a spine. I knew exactly what to do. No drama, no long explanation about why she was toxic, no attempt to educate her about basic human decency. Just one perfect, boundary-setting response that said everything it needed to say. This workplace is a safe space, and you are not welcome here. That's it. 11 words that summed up 3 years of therapy, personal growth, and learning to value my own peace over family obligation. I didn't need to win against her anymore. Didn't need her to understand or apologize or change. I just needed her to stay the hell out of my life. You want to know what real victory looks like? It's not some dramatic confrontation or public humiliation. It's building a life so beautiful and peaceful that toxic people can't even get close enough to mess with it. It's surrounding yourself with people who love and support you without conditions. It's waking up every morning in a space that feels safe, working a job that feeds your soul, and going to bed knowing that you chose yourself over dysfunction. That scared, broken girl lying on the living room floor with a twisted arm had become a woman who chose self-respect over silence, boundaries over bullshit, and peace over family drama. And that choice? That was the real closure. Not some fantasy apology or magical family reconciliation, but the simple, powerful act of building a life they couldn't touch. Game over. I won.